The massive viewing screen at the center of the Galactic Council's observation chamber displayed a cluster of unknown vessels. Admiral Krill of the Council's Defense Force squinted his 4 eyes, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The ships were tiny, almost laughably so compared to the standard vessels used by Council races. "Are you certain these readings are correct?" he asked, his scaled fingers tapping against the holographic control panel. Officer Draxx nodded, her antennae twitching with excitement. "Yes, Admiral. The scans have been verified 3 times. It's a fleet of 27 vessels, but they're unlike anything in our database." The chamber buzzed with whispers as more council members gathered around the display. The unknown ships appeared as mere dots compared to the size chart of a standard council cruiser projected alongside them. "Look at the size difference," laughed General Draxx, his massive frame shaking with amusement. "The largest of their ships is barely the size of our scout vessels. This must be some primitive species patrol fleet." But not everyone shared his amusement. Captain Mira, a veteran of countless space battles, stepped closer to the display. Her cybernetic eye whirred as it zoomed in on the strange fleet's formation. "There's something odd about their positioning," she muttered. "It's too precise, too coordinated for a primitive species." The room fell silent as new data streamed across the screen. Officer Draxx's voice trembled slightly as she read the report. "Sir, we've identified their origin. They're from Earth." "Earth?" Admiral Krill frowned. "The isolated planet in Sector 7. "Yes, sir. The same planet that achieved faster-than-light travel just 15 years ago." General Draxx waved his hand dismissively. "So what? They're newcomers to space. Look at those tiny ships. They clearly don't understand proper military vessel design. Our smallest defensive cruiser could probably handle their entire fleet." Captain Mira shook her head. "Sir, with all due respect, I've studied Earth's historical records. They have a saying, 'Size isn't everything.'" As if to emphasize her point, new sensor data appeared on the screen. The energy readings from the human vessels were unusually high for their size. The power-to-mass ratio was off the charts. "Impossible," muttered one of the technical analysts. "These readings suggest their ships are packed with technology. But how do they fit everything into such small spaces?" Admiral Krill raised his hand for silence. "What's their current heading?" "They're moving toward Trading Station Beta 7. Sir, standard approach vector, all proper protocols being followed." The Admiral stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Send the usual welcoming committee. 3 patrol ships should be more than enough to escort such a modest fleet." Captain Mira stepped forward again. "Sir, I recommend we send at least 1 heavy cruiser." "These humans—" "Captain," General Draxx interrupted, "we're not going to waste valuable military resources on a handful of undersized vessels. The patrol ships will be fine." As the orders were sent out, Captain Mira lingered at the display, studying the human fleet's formation. Something about it reminded her of ancient hunting patterns she'd studied. The way the smaller ships flanked the larger ones, the spacing between vessels, the apparent gaps that could easily be closed. "You're worried," Officer Draxx observed quietly, coming to stand beside her. "I've studied thousands of species and their military tactics," Captain Mira replied. "And I've learned one universal truth. The ones who survive and thrive aren't necessarily the biggest or strongest. They're the ones who make the most of what they have." She pointed to the screen where the human ships continued their steady advance. "These humans, they've packed battleship-grade technology into destroyer-sized hulls. That doesn't speak of primitive design. That speaks of efficiency, and efficient warriors are the most dangerous kind." As the council chamber slowly emptied, the human fleet continued its approach, their small ships moving with precise coordination. They might have appeared tiny against the vast backdrop of space, but as Captain Mira had noticed, they moved with the confidence of predators, not prey. The welcoming committee was already on its way. completely unaware that they were about to learn an important lesson about judging ships by their size. Trading Station Beta 7 buzzed with activity as news of the approaching human fleet spread. The 3 patrol ships sent by the Council took up their escort positions, their massive hulls dwarfing the human vessels. The station's observation deck was packed with aliens eager to see these newcomers. Commander Wells of the human flagship, Swift, watched the patrol ships with quiet amusement. His small fleet had traveled across half the galaxy, and everywhere they went, the reaction was the same. Bigger ships trying to show off their size. "Sir," his sensor officer reported, "they're scanning us again. 5th time in the last hour." Wells smiled. "Let them scan. They'll only see what we want them to see." The patrol ship's crews were growing frustrated. Their scans kept hitting advanced deflection systems, and the readings they did get made no sense. How could ships so small generate such powerful energy signatures? On Trading Station Beta 7, Station Chief Port stood at his command center, watching the approach. His assistant rushed in with a new report. "Sir, the detailed scans are complete. You need to see this." The assistant's 3 hands shook as they handed over the datapad. Port's eyes widened as he read. The human ships weren't just small, they were compressed miracles of engineering. Where Council ships had huge empty halls and massive crew quarters, the human vessels used every cubic inch of space. Their engines were miniaturized but more powerful. Their weapon systems were compact but deadly precise. "Impossible," Port muttered. "Nobody builds ships like this." The power requirements alone showed. He stopped as new data appeared on his screen. The human ships were powering up their landing thrusters, preparing to dock. The energy readings were off the charts. The lead patrol ship's captain, Officer Draxx, opened a communication channel. "Human vessels, you will dock at the outer rings only. Your small ships might not handle the main docking bay's gravity field." Commander Wells' response was polite but firm. "Thank you for your concern, Trading Station Beta 7, but our ships are fully capable of handling any docking procedure. We'll proceed to the main bay as planned." The human ships moved with incredible precision. Where Council ships needed huge turning radiuses, the Earth vessels pivoted almost on the spot. Their formation split and reformed smoothly, like a school of fish. In the station's diplomatic hall, Ambassador Link prepared to meet the humans. He had dealt with many new species before, but something about these humans made him nervous. The doors opened, and Commander Wells entered with his small team. The humans were shorter than most Council races, but they moved with confidence. Their uniforms were neat and practical, without the usual elaborate decorations other species used to show their rank. "Welcome to Trading Station Beta 7, Ambassador Link said, trying to sound impressive. "We've prepared our largest conference room for." "A smaller room would be fine," Wells interrupted politely. "We prefer efficiency over size." The meeting that followed shocked the station's staff. The humans presented trade offers, technological exchange proposals, and military cooperation agreements. Each proposal was carefully crafted, showing deep understanding of Council politics and economics. Back in his office, Station Chief Port reviewed the day's events with growing concern. He opened a secure channel to Council headquarters. "You need to understand something," he reported. "These humans, they're not what we thought. Their ships aren't small because they're primitive. They're small because that's all the space they need." He sent through the detailed scans. "They've managed to fit the firepower of a heavy cruiser into a ship the size of a corvette. Their crews work in compact spaces we consider too cramped for storage. Every system, every component is optimized for maximum efficiency." On the main docking bay, crews gathered to watch the human ships. The vessels sat among the giant Council ships like speedboats among cargo ships, but there was something predatory about their sleek designs, something that made veteran spacers nervous. Commander Wells stood at his ship's viewport, watching the aliens study his fleet. He knew what they were thinking. The same thing everyone thought when they first saw human ships, but soon they would learn what humanity had known for centuries. It's not the size of the ship in the fight, but the fight in the ship that matters. The real demonstration of human capabilities was yet to come, and when it did, the Council would learn why Earth's Navy had chosen efficiency over size. 3 days after the humans docked at Trading Station Beta 7, the pirates made their move. The Red Claw pirates were known for targeting smaller ships, and the human fleet looked like easy pickings. Their leader, Captain Blade, commanded 5 heavy raiders, each one 3 times the size of the largest human vessel. "Look at those tiny things," Blade laughed, showing his sharp teeth. "This will be the easiest raid of our careers." His second-in-command wasn't so sure. "Boss, something feels wrong. No species builds ships that small for deep space travel." "Scared of the little boats, are you?" Blade mocked. "Launch the attack. Standard formation." The pirates' ships dropped out of hyperspace, surrounding the human fleet. They expected panic, emergency signals, or desperate attempts to flee. Instead, the human ships calmly broke formation and scattered in what looked like complete chaos. "They're running," one pirate crew member shouted. Captain Blade smiled. "Fire warning shots. Let's show them." He never finished his sentence. The seemingly random movements of the human ships suddenly made sense. They hadn't scattered in panic. They had moved into attack positions. The first sign of trouble came when the pirates' targeting computers failed to lock onto the human vessels. The small ships moved too quickly, changing direction in ways that seemed to ignore normal physics. "Impossible," the pirate weapons officer shouted. "Nothing that size should move that fast." Commander Wells' voice came over the open channel, calm and almost amused. "This is your only warning. Withdraw now." The pirates responded with full attacks. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes filled space and hit nothing. The human ships danced between the shots like leaves in the wind. Then the humans showed their teeth. From hidden ports on the small ships, swarms of even smaller craft emerged. Attack drones, barely larger than space pods, zipped toward the pirate vessels. The pirates laughed at first, until the drones opened fire. Precise laser cuts appeared along the pirates' hull armor. Not random damage, but carefully planned strikes that disabled weapons, engines, and shield generators. The human ships coordinated their attacks perfectly, hurting the larger pirate vessels, like sheepdogs guiding sheep. "Our shields," Blade screamed. "How are they cutting through our shields?" The answer came in the form of more surgical strikes. The human ships had analyzed the pirate vessels' shield frequencies and found their weak points in seconds. Where the pirates relied on brute force, the humans used precision. On his bridge, Commander Wells directed the battle like a conductor leading an orchestra. "Target 2, disable their port engines. Target 3, take out their communication array. Let's show them what Earth tactics can do." The pirates tried to regroup, but their large ships were too slow to keep up with the humans' rapid maneuvers. Every time they turned to face one threat, 3 more appeared behind them. "Boss," the second-in-command shouted. "They're not trying to destroy us. They're testing their weapons on us." He was right. The humans were systematically trying different attack patterns, recording how the pirates' ships responded. This wasn't just a battle. It was a combat evaluation. Within 15 minutes, all 5 pirate ships floated helplessly in space, their main systems disabled. Not one human vessel had taken a direct hit. As Council security ships finally arrived to arrest the pirates, they found Captain Blade sitting in his command chair, still in shock. "They were so small," he kept muttering. "How could they be so small?" Commander Wells sent his report to Earth Naval Command. Combat test successful. Local pirate vessels provided excellent practice for crew training. Confirmed effectiveness of drone swarm tactics against larger vessels. Recommend continued use of mobility-based strategy. In his holding cell, Captain Blade learned an important lesson about human ships. His cellmate, an old space trader, explained it well. "You fool. Humans come from a world with deep oceans. They learned warfare from creatures smaller than their ships that could kill the largest beasts in their seas. They don't build big ships because they don't need to. They learned their lessons from nature itself. As news of the battle spread, other pirate groups quietly marked human ships as do not engage targets. But for the council races watching the sensor logs, this was just the beginning of their education about human combat capabilities. The tiny fleet had shown its first card, but it was far from the last. The council's military analysis chamber was in chaos. Admiral Krill stood before a massive display showing footage from the pirate battle, while dozens of military experts from different species argued about what they were seeing. "Play it again," he ordered, rubbing his tired eyes. This was the 100th viewing, and still, they found new details to analyze. On the screen, a human ship no bigger than a transport vessel executed a turn that should have torn it apart. The recording showed the pirate ship's weapons passing through empty space, where the human vessel had been just seconds before. "Their reaction time is incredible," said military expert Thorne, pointing at the display. "Look at how they predicted the pirates' firing patterns. That's not just good pilots, that's advanced combat computers packed into those tiny hulls." Another expert, Dr. Vix, pulled up the energy readings. "Their power management is unlike anything we've seen. These small ships produce more energy than our cruisers, but their heat signatures are minimal. They're using every scrap of power efficiently." Admiral Krill remembered Captain Mira's warnings. He had called her paranoid then. Now she stood quietly in the corner, watching the others catch up to what she had already figured out. "Tell them what you found in the Earth historical records," he said to her. Captain Mira stepped forward, activating a new display. "What you're seeing isn't new technology. It's old tactics, adapted for space. Humans learned these lessons centuries ago in their ocean warfare." The room fell silent as she showed images of Earth's naval history. Submarines hunting larger ships, small torpedo boats taking down battleships, PT boats running circles around bigger vessels. "They're not building small ships because they have to," she explained. "They're building them this way because they know it works. For every tactic we saw in that pirate battle, I can show you a historical example from their oceans." Dr. Vix studied the data with growing concern. According to these readings, those human ships we saw, they're not even their best technology. They're just test vessels. The room erupted in worried murmurs. If these were just test ships, what were their actual military vessels capable of? In another part of the council space, the news was spreading. Species that had dismissed humans as newcomers now scrambled to learn more about them. Trade ships reported seeing human vessels practicing maneuvers that defied conventional space combat doctrine. Back on Trading Station Beta 7, Commander Wells received an interesting message. The station's engineering team wanted to study human ship design. He smiled as he read their formal request, remembering Earth's old submarine warfare doctrine. "Run silent, run deep." "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're getting similar requests from 12 different council species. They all want to know how we pack so much into small ships." Wells looked out at the massive council vessels docked nearby. "Tell them what my old instructor used to say. The bigger the ship, the bigger the target." In the council's strategic planning department, a young analyst made a frightening discovery. He rushed into his superior's office, clutching a data pad. "Sir, I've been studying human military expansion patterns. Look at this." The display showed human territory spreading through space. But unlike other species who built large outposts and massive stations, humans established small, mobile bases. Their patrol routes were unpredictable. Their supply lines were hidden. "They're treating all of space like an ocean," the analyst explained. "These small ships, they're not just warships. They're part of a completely different way of thinking about space combat." Admiral Krill called an emergency council meeting. The chamber was packed as he presented the findings. "We've been wrong," he admitted. "We thought size meant power, but humans learned something in their oceans that we never had to learn in space. They learned that the small and quick can defeat the large and powerful. Captain Mira added the final point, and now they're teaching that lesson to the galaxy. As if to emphasize her words, new reports arrived. Human ships had been spotted testing advanced stealth systems. Their tiny vessels could now practically disappear from sensors. The Council races began to realize a hard truth. They had built their fleets to fight enemies like themselves. But humans weren't like them. They had brought their ocean warfare doctrine to the stars, and space would never be the same. The tiny fleet wasn't just a curiosity anymore. It was a revolution in space warfare, and it was just getting started. The Draxx Empire had seen enough. As one of the oldest members of the Council, they took pride in their massive warships. The sight of tiny human vessels gaining respect was too much for them to bear. Supreme Commander Vox of the Draxx stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Mountain of Power. At 15 kilometers long, it was the largest warship in Council space. Behind it, 50 Draxx heavy cruisers formed an invasion fleet. "Send the message," he ordered. The ultimatum reached Earth's fleet simple and clear. Remove your ships from Council space, or face destruction. Commander Wells received the message while his fleet was running combat drills. He read it twice, then smiled. "They still don't understand," he said to his bridge crew. "Signal all ships. Battle formation Delta." The human fleet split into 5 groups, each smaller than a single Draxx cruiser. The Draxx commanders laughed at what they saw as desperate tactics. "Look at them scatter," Supreme Commander Vox sneered. "Like frightened fish." A veteran Draxx officer wasn't so sure. "Sir, their movement patterns. They remind me of something I read about Earth's old ocean predators, something called wolf packs." Before Vox could respond, the human ships vanished from their sensors. "Impossible," Vox shouted. "Nothing can hide from our sensors." But the humans had learned their stealth technology from Earth's submarines. Their ships could mask their energy signatures, becoming nearly invisible in the vast darkness of space. The first strike came from nowhere. 3 Draxx cruisers suddenly lost power, their engines cut with surgical precision. Before anyone could react, the attacking human ships disappeared again. "Find them," Vox commanded. "How can ships so small cause such damage?" The answer came in waves. Human vessels appeared from different directions, struck hard, and vanished again. They never attacked the same way twice. Each strike tested a different weakness in the massive Draxx ships. On the Swift, Commander Wells coordinated the attacks. Group 2, test their port shields. Group 4, check their reaction time to attacks from below. Remember your submarine warfare training. The Draxx fleet tried to stay together for protection, but this only made them a better target. The human ships slipped between their defensive formations like fish through a net. "Sir," Wells' tactical officer reported, "the Draxx ships are bunching up, just like you predicted." Wells nodded. "They think like surface ships, expecting attacks from one level. They forget space is 3-dimensional. All groups, execute Operation Depth Charge." The human fleet struck from above, below, and all sides at once. Their compact size let them get closer than any large ship would dare. They fired special weapons designed to disable rather than destroy, turning the mighty Draxx vessels into floating hulks. Supreme Commander Vox watched in horror as his fleet was systematically taken apart. His mighty flagship, the Mountain of Power, couldn't turn fast enough to fight the nimble human ships. "This is impossible," he kept shouting. "They're so small. How can they do this?" The answer came from his tactical officer. "Sir, size doesn't matter if you can't hit your target." Within an hour, 40 of the 50 Draxx cruisers had lost power. The others were trapped in a deadly dance with opponents they couldn't catch. In the council chambers, the emergency meeting was interrupted by the battle footage. They watched in stunned silence as the tiny human fleet disabled the mightiest ships in council space. "Now you understand," Captain Mira said quietly. "Humans didn't build small ships because they had to. They built them because that's what works best. Every lesson they learned in their oceans, They've adapted for space. As the Draxx fleet retreated in shame, Commander Wells sent a simple message to all council races: size isn't everything. We learned this lesson in our oceans centuries ago. We're happy to teach it again in space. The crisis had turned into a lesson, and the galaxy would never look at small ships the same way again. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had changed space warfare forever. And they were just getting started. The Draxx Empire wasn't done. After their humiliating defeat, they gathered their entire battle fleet, over 200 massive warships, for one final battle. This time, they wouldn't underestimate the humans. No more games, Supreme Commander Vox declared from his repaired flagship. This time, we crushed them completely. But the humans had been busy too. Commander Wells had called in reinforcements. Not big ships, but more of the same small, deadly vessels that had proved so effective. The two fleets faced each other in the Omega sector. The Draxx ships formed a wall of metal stretching thousands of kilometers. The human fleet looked like a scatter of dots in comparison. Last chance to surrender, Vox transmitted to the human fleet. Commander Wells' response was simple: why don't you come and find out why Earth never built big ships? The battle began. This time, the Draxx were ready for stealth tactics. They had installed new sensors. They had studied human attack patterns. They had prepared countermeasures. But humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years. They had one more lesson to teach. All ships, initiate battle plan Thermopylae, Wells ordered. The human fleet split into tiny groups of 3 ships each. The Draxx prepared for the same hit-and-run tactics they'd seen before. Instead, the human ships charged straight at them. They'd gone mad. Vox laughed. Fire all weapons. The space between the fleets lit up with energy beams and plasma torpedoes. But the human ships weren't trying to dodge this time. Instead, they released clouds of special particles, chaff, a technology as old as radar itself. The Draxx weapons scattered harmlessly through the clouds. Their advanced targeting systems, designed to track large ships, were blinded by thousands of small, moving targets. What's happening? Vox demanded. Why can't we hit them? The human ships punched through the chaff clouds, now inside the Draxx formation. At point-blank range, size didn't matter anymore. The small ships could hit anything, while the huge Draxx vessels struggled to target anything so close. This is impossible, a Draxx officer shouted. Our ships are 1,000 times larger. That's the problem. Wells transmitted as his ships struck from all directions. You built your ships to fight other big ships. We built ours to win. The human vessels demonstrated their full capabilities. Some fired special nets that tangled the Draxx engines. Others used electromagnetic pulses to shut down weapon systems. Each small ship carried different weapons, making it impossible for the Draxx to defend against everything. On his bridge, Wells watched the battle unfold. Just like the old stories, he said. David versus Goliath. Sometimes the small stone hits harder than the giant's club. The Draxx try to adapt, but their ships were too big, too slow to change tactics quickly. They had spent centuries building bigger ships, thinking size meant power. Now they learned that power came in many forms. All ships, execute Operation Slingshot, Wells commanded. The human fleet moved in perfect coordination. Small groups of ships linked their energy weapons, combining their power. Suddenly, ships a fraction of the size of Draxx vessels were punching holes through their strongest shields. How? Vox screamed as his mighty flagship lost power. How can such small ships have such power? The answer came from his own tactical officer. Sir, they're not using size for power. They're using coordination and precision. Each small ship is part of a bigger plan. Within 2 hours, the mighty Draxx fleet was in ruins, not destroyed. The humans had deliberately disabled rather than destroyed their ships. It was a final lesson in humiliation. Commander Wells sent one last message to the defeated Draxx fleet. Size isn't power. Coordination is power. Precision is power. Adaptation is power. These are the lessons Earth learned long ago. Today, we taught them to the stars. As rescue ships arrived to help the stranded Draxx vessels, the human fleet regrouped. Not a single human ship had been lost. The tiny fleet had faced the largest ships in the galaxy and proved that sometimes the smallest stone can bring down the largest giant. The galaxy would never be the same, and the age of massive warships was coming to an end. 1 month after the Great Battle, the Galactic Council held its largest meeting in history. Representatives from every spacefaring race gathered to discuss the changes humans had brought to space warfare. Admiral Krill stood before the assembly, looking very different from the dismissive leader who had first mocked the human ships. Behind him, a hologram showed the new designs many council races were already developing, smaller, faster ships inspired by human vessels. "We were wrong," he admitted to the packed chamber. "For centuries, we believed bigger meant better. The humans taught us differently." Commander Wells sat in the guest of honor's seat, his small frame almost lost in the massive council chair designed for much larger aliens. He smiled, remembering how they had once laughed at the size of his ships. "The humans," Admiral Krill continued, "brought their ocean warfare experience to space. They showed us that space combat isn't about size. It's about speed, coordination, and smart tactics." The chamber's main screen displayed footage from the battles. The tiny human ships dancing between massive vessels, striking with precision, disappearing like ghosts. "Every council race has requested human military advisors," announced Council Leader Draxx. "For the first time in our history, we're completely changing how we think about space warfare." In the shipyards across Council space, construction had already begun. The huge warships were being broken down. In their place, smaller, more efficient vessels took shape. Some races even sent their engineers to Earth to study ancient submarine designs. Captain Mira, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, presented the next part of the report. "The pirates in Council space have decreased by 80% since the human demonstrations. They know their big ships are now easy targets for our new patrol vessels." Commander Wells was invited to speak. He walked to the podium, looking small compared to the alien leaders, but no one was laughing now. "On Earth, we have a saying," he began. "The bigger they are, the harder they fall. But we didn't come here to make others fall. We came to help everyone rise." He activated a new hologram, showing joint training exercises between human ships and the new council vessels, small ships from different species working together, learning the tactics that humans had perfected. "We learned our lessons in Earth's oceans," Wells continued. "Our submarines taught us that stealth beats size. Our PT boats showed us that speed beats power. Our torpedo boats proved that small weapons, properly used, could defeat the largest battleships." The council members nodded, finally understanding why humans had chosen this path. "But our greatest lesson," Wells said, "was learning that victory doesn't come from size or strength alone. It comes from using what you have wisely." The changes spread beyond the military. Trading ships became smaller, faster, harder for pirates to catch. Exploration vessels shrank in size, but grew in capability. The entire galaxy was learning the human way of thinking. Efficiency over size, skill over scale. Supreme Commander Vox of the Draxx Empire rose to speak, his pride now tempered by wisdom. "We have served on the Council for 10,000 years," he said, "but in 1 year, the humans taught us more about space warfare than we learned in all that time." The Council session ended with a historic decision. The humans were given leadership of the Council's new Space Combat Training Division. Their tiny fleet, once mocked, would now teach others how to protect Council space. As Commander Wells walked back to his ship after the ceremony, he passed the massive alien vessels in the docking bay. Next to them sat the small human ships that had changed everything. A group of alien officers stopped to salute him, not mockingly, as they once had, but with genuine respect. "Sir," his first officer said as they boarded the Swift, "they're not laughing at our small ships anymore." Wells smiled, looking out at the stars. "No, they're not. Because now they understand what Earth learned long ago. It's not the size of the ship in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the ship. His crew finished with him, the old saying now known across the galaxy. The tiny fleet had earned its place among the stars, teaching a lesson that would echo through space for generations to come. Never judge a fleet by its size, especially if it's human.